What I'd like to do, if it's okay to shift this a little bit, is I'd like to talk about what I see too often in the organizations that I work with,
Please do.
about a strategy that doesn't go to plan. And what I find is when I get into many of these organizations, they really don't have a strategy.
Mm,
What they have is maybe the strategy that they built 5, 10 years ago. And it was very successful for them in the past.
mm,
And they just keep executing it and keep doing the same thing and doing the same thing and doing the same thing over and over again. Yet the markets are changing. The tools and abilities that we have to execute on those strategies have changed, but they do the same thing. And some of them see compelling results, I think more drawn by, sheer volume of trying hard or and some luck.
Welcome to the How to Not Execute Your Strategy podcast. I'm your host, Tim Ohai. These are the lessons that make you the leader you want to be. Go to timohai.com to learn more. My guest today is Dave Brock. Dave is the author of one of the absolute best sales leader books I have ever read, The Sales Manager Survival Guide. And as the CEO of Partners in Excellence, he is the trusted advisor of senior executives globally. Dave is truly an expert in business growth. And in this conversation, we break down the hidden dangers of success, why so many leaders fall into complacency, how curiosity drives real strategy, and what it takes to unlock your organization's full potential before it's too late. See the show notes for more information about Dave and to also get access to the leader guide for this episode. Let's get to it. Oh my goodness. I am so excited to have somebody who's not only a dear friend, but actually a bit of a mentor to me, Dave Brock. Welcome to the show.
Well, geez, with that kind of flattery starting out, we might as well stop while I'm ahead.
Yeah, right. No,
Yeah.
Dave, you've been around and seen so much, and part of this is age, but part of it's also just ability. You've got a tremendous amount of wisdom that you've earned through your own expertise in how businesses run and very specifically how they make money, but it's more than that. So I'm just going to go right into the discussion and then see where it takes us.
Yeah.
Tell us about a time, Dave, where you had a strategy that didn't go according to plan.
What I'd like to do, if it's okay to shift this a little bit, is I'd like to talk about what I see too often in the organizations that I work with,
Please do.
about a strategy that doesn't go to plan. And what I find is when I get into many of these organizations, they really don't have a strategy.
Mm,
What they have is maybe the strategy that they built 5, 10 years ago. And it was very successful for them in the past.
mm,
And they just keep executing it and keep doing the same thing and doing the same thing and doing the same thing over and over again. Yet the markets are changing. The tools and abilities that we have to execute on those strategies have changed, but they do the same thing. And some of them see compelling results, I think more drawn by, sheer volume of trying hard and some luck. But for instance, this morning I was on a call with a CRO and we were talking about some things. And it's a relatively young company, been around maybe 6, 7 years. And if you look at their revenue, it just skyrocketed. And they were growing like crazy. And all of a sudden, it's come to a sudden stop. And, I started asking her some questions. I said, what's your strategy? And she says, I don't know what our strategy is.
Mm.
She says, we have these products that we've always sold. And I said, does the market still need those products? And she laughed and she said, the problem is they don't.
Yeah. So there's two big things right off the bat you're talking about. One, I mean, it's the very definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. But underneath that, and I'd say a root cause issue, is the sin of resulting. It's the sin of assuming the result you're getting is because you were great, not the innovation sold itself or the market was primed or there were no competitors in the water. When you crack this open and you talk to a lot of leaders in a lot of companies in a lot of different industries, what is the core root cause issue that these leaders are seemingly ignorant of?
This will sound funny. I think the root cause issue is they're being successful or successful enough.
Mm.
And also, you don't know how many times I go into a situation where they say, Dave, we've been making our numbers. Or Dave, we're making our numbers, but we're doing it by the skin of our teeth and we're close to it. And every once in a while we miss and all, but they're being successful. So there's no incentive for them to step back and say, has the world changed? Is the demand for our products as great as they were? And going back to like this session this morning with this CRO, she said, as I look back at our growth, she said, there was something that happened in the world 5 years ago that caused our sales to, for various good reasons, to skyrocket. It happened to be they're in a market where regulatory changes have great up and down impacts. And she said there was a regulatory change that caused everybody to need what we have. And fast forward to today, that regulatory change doesn't exist anymore. So the need for what they do has plummeted. There's still some people that have a legitimate need for this, but they haven't stepped back and asked the question, what's changed with our customers? What's changed in terms of what they need and how we best help them? And, they're going into a big executive planning session next week on strategy. And I said, you have to lead the team into helping them understand that the strategies that they had before that made them successful, the world has changed. And regardless of how well she does as a CRO in terms of tuning her people, getting them very execution focused, the demand for those offerings just doesn't exist anymore because of the regulatory changes.
So do companies then just ignore their execution capabilities simply because their results are good enough?
I think they get caught in this kind of complacency. It's good enough, it's working, why change? Without recognizing that the world around them has changed and that they have to change, or that competition has changed, that there's somebody coming in proposing something new and that they need to adopt their strategies and do those things. So it's kind of this thing of just being just successful enough and becoming complacent with what we're doing.
So is the complacency driven by any common factors that you've seen?
What I see is a decline in curiosity. I see a decline in imagination. I think I shared this with you in the past. I was doing some consulting for about a $6 billion company. And they've been growing for years and meeting all their goals and all that kind of thing. And they said, Dave, here are plans for the next 3 or 4 years. What do we need to change to continue to achieve our plans? And I said, I did a study. It came back to them, sat with the board of directors, the executive team. And I said, no problem making your goals for the next 3 or 4 years. Here's some things I'd look at. Here's some things I'd tweak and so on and so forth, and some changes to make it more effective and so on and so forth. But then I said, I'm sure glad I'm not a shareholder, which is a pretty obnoxious thing for somebody to say. And they said, why would you say a thing like this? And I said, you're underperforming your potential. I said, you're looking at your goals in this way. And if you look at your markets and the market opportunity that exists, if you look at your go-to-market strategies and the way you're doing this, you could easily double what you're doing. So because you haven't seen this bigger picture, because you've constrained yourself to looking at things this way, you're missing a huge opportunity. And for that reason, I wouldn't want to invest in you because I see that opportunity that you can achieve. And it was literally with some very small tweaks, they could increase their revenue by 50 to 70% within probably 18 months to 2 years.
Wow.
Over what their plan was.
Right. Here's my big question. How much disruption would have been required to do that different approach, to take that different path?
Fairly minimal.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So let me ask this question though, because a lot of the reason that I see weak strategies trying to be shoved onto people is because the leaders who generated a strategy are trying to avoid disruption. And at the same time, they're preaching, we're going to transform, we're going to do all this other stuff. So what happens is they cut off the scope of the strategy very, very early so that it becomes do more with less. And yet we still want this amazing growth. You're not talking about that at all. You're saying a situation where it would have been easy to go after this new growth. They just weren't curious to do so.
They were blind to the opportunity.
Okay.
And again, I think this was probably the sin of success. They had been meeting their goals. They were growing and doing very, very well in the markets, at least according to their perceptions of themselves. And they had aggressive growth goals for the future, but they weren't stepping back to say, how has the world changed?
Yeah.
Where are the opportunities? What can we change about what we do that might enable us to grow even faster? What can we change about the markets we address that would enable us to grow faster? So again, is part of it is this combined thing of the comfort of success, not creating that discomfort to start saying I should change things. If I go in and do a turnaround, clearly they recognize they have problems. They recognize we have to change things and that kind of thing. When I go into some of these big companies that have been very successful, they have the same things that I see in the turnarounds, but they're blind to it because they're achieving their goals. They've now started not becoming curious or innovative or so on because they're being successful, and it's why change, why rock the boat. And again, I'm a person that has a mindset as it's my God-given right to 100% share of market, but I have to figure out how to do it. Is I started looking at them, I said, there's all this opportunity. Don't you want to go after it? And after they saw it, they said, oh my God, we've been missing this. And I think sometimes it takes an outsider to come in and do those
100%.
things. And I hope it does a lot because it keeps you and I fully employed.
Totally. So raising my hand for sure. But so I want to just peel this back because I think this is critical because I've railed for a while now about the sin of resulting and how resulting really, really, really is toxic. It does have a lot of long-term negative effects. It's kind of like it's the smoking that leads to cancer. It's like you think, oh, I'm looking cool or whatever. Next thing you know, you can't breathe. If you were like most leaders, you learned how to execute strategy through trial and error, and your teammates learned the same way, if they've even learned it at all. The result is that how we execute our strategies generates massive waste and fatigue, but it doesn't have to be this way. If you'd like to master how strategies execute, go to timohai.com/masterclass now. You'll find everything I use to help my clients thrive all in one power-packed place. Don't you think it's time to invest in yourself? All right, back to the interview. What I hear is the fear of disruption kills the curiosity that these leaders should be operating with, and they're missing opportunities to improve and grow that aren't disruptive. And yet it's this wicked kind of loop that I don't want to disrupt. So I'm not going to look for things that actually I need to be looking at. Because I think of Sun Tzu's Art of War. The whole point of don't go into battle unless you've surveyed the battlefield. And these are people who have just lost sight of the battlefield. They're just continually keeping the troops in motion because it, quote, works. They're not losing, basically.
Yeah.
And they're missing truly the opportunities that are right in front of them.
See, and I think that's an interesting point. I would phrase it a little bit differently because I'm not sure it's a fear of disruption. I think it's a lack of consciousness that there's something to be disrupted. And that's where I say maybe the lack of curiosity to see that there's something better that we can do. There's something we can change about how we do things. There's something we can change about our markets. There's a new opportunity coming up. So I don't know it's so much the fear of disruption because they don't fear anything. They're being very successful. I think it's the lack of curiosity to say, should we disrupt ourselves? Most of the time when I confront people with this, they get excited and say, we want to do something about this. How do we do this? But they've just been oblivious to this. And it's just like you and I, I drive down the same highways every day when I'm going shopping or going to certain client meetings and so on. And I'm oblivious to a whole bunch of things. And then all of a sudden I said, well, my God, there's a brand new building here. It's 10 stories and it's been going on for several years, but I've been absolutely oblivious to it.
So these same leaders started their careers just like everybody else, entry level, coming in, whatever their role was, and have climbed the ladder. They had to be curious and be successful at being curious to climb that ladder, to take on the next role of responsibility. I can't imagine someone being promoted continuously who didn't have that curiosity, who didn't have that appetite for looking at opportunity that could be there that's not being seen by others. Am I missing something there, or did it seem like it?
I think I see it a little bit differently. These leaders in their development had to achieve their goals.
Yes.
But, so they successfully achieved their goals. They came in as an entry-level salesperson or as an entry-level product developer, and they started becoming successful and achieving their goals and doing all those sorts of things. That doesn't necessarily mean that they were curious. In the fact of that meant they had methods, tools, support, reinforcement to help them achieve their goals, and they were very successful at doing this. So they went from one level of success to another level of success, all well-deserved because they were doing that. But I don't know, except in certain kinds of businesses and certain kinds of industries, curiosity isn't a metric of success.
Yeah. The analogy I come up with is pro sports, and I'm a big sports fan, so there's no surprise there. But I think of people who are very successful on their little league team, and then they get to their high school team and they become very successful, and then a big university will come along and grab them, or perhaps like in Europe with the football clubs, they'll pull that player in, and then hopefully they're successful. And then when they get to the Premier League or they get to the NFL or the NBA, whatever, you start seeing huge gaps in somebody being a good player versus somebody being a true champion. Right. And the champions are consistently different, not in their ability, they're different in their mindset. And it's that mindset piece, right?
So that's the piece is if I look at kind of the standout organizations, the organizations that I tend to gravitate to and tend to gravitate to me, those are the organizations that have built in constant curiosity, constant innovation, constant strategy. I forgot what the saying was, but it's, we'll kill our own products, not have some competitor kill our own products. So they really look at saying, how do we kill our own products to come out with the next new innovation that changes things, and so on. So the top performing organizations reward, and in fact, I've trained people in, I have several organizations I work with where we have curriculums on training them in curiosity, training them in collaborative conversations, training them on critical thinking, training them on problem solving, because that's an embedded part of their culture. And they keep developing that and rewarding that and measuring people on those kinds of things. But when you look at the vast majority of other organizations, they aren't there.
That's
and
amazing.
They're prisoners of their own success, where if you just started looking at one thing differently, imagine what you could do.
It blows my mind, and I'm having my own little hot flash as I think about how one quality impacts mindset. And once that mindset shifts, it literally creates a cascade of goodness. And
Exactly.
if we remove that one quality, curiosity, what it produces is frankly toxicity, because without curiosity and that wondering, well, why did that happen? You then become, and I'll use the word addicted to the results you produce, assuming, and then you start assuming, and all these other things start jumping into play to say, we're great. Therefore, no matter what we do, we'll be successful, even if it's the wrong thing, even if there is no innovation in the pipeline, even if we have people leaving the company to go work at other companies because they're tired of how we do what we do. And they still tell themselves, we're great because in the past, we've had these great results and things are still, quote, good enough. Is that a fair summary?
I mean, you really got my mind spinning on this. I think, there's a cycle you go through. You go through complacency, then you get to toxicity, because complacency, things are okay the way they are and so on. Then all of a sudden, things aren't working very well. And you start getting this toxicity, this blame game, this, let's just ramp up the volumes and do more and more and more. But again, the mindset changes from complacent to toxic.
That's so well said.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Dave, as we wrap up, is there any final advice you would offer to leaders to say, hey, look, if you really want to change the narrative in your organization, if you really want to be excellent at the execution of strategy, what would you say?
I think that one area too is this curiosity, not being constantly dissatisfied with how things are good, how good things are right now, is to say, is there a better way? Is there a different way? Is there something that we need to change despite our success? To continue to challenge yourself, is there a different way? Because the interesting thing is, if you aren't doing that for yourself, somebody else is going to do that to you.
100%. Drop the mic.
Yeah.
Dave, it's been a joy. Thanks again so much for being a guest on the podcast. And I appreciate what we've just gone through. I know I learned a lot. Thank you.
Well, you got me thinking about some different things too. So there's a ton of blog posts that are going to start coming out as a result of this.
I look forward to reading them. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tim.
I hope you enjoyed that interview and got some solid takeaways. Here are 3 that I'd like to highlight. 1, success can be a trap. Just because you're hitting your targets doesn't mean your strategy is still sound. Many organizations unknowingly rely on outdated approaches that were built for a different market reality. Don't mistake momentum for relevance. What worked yesterday may be silently failing today. 2, curiosity isn't optional. It's strategic. The best leaders constantly ask, what's changed? What are we missing? Curiosity drives innovation. It sharpens strategy and reveals hidden opportunities. Without it, even high-performing teams become stagnant and blind to what's possible. 3. Complacency turns into toxicity fast. When curiosity disappears, complacency sets in. And once results start slipping, fear-based leadership takes over, leading to blame, dysfunction, and disengagement. Staying proactive, not reactive, is the only way to break the cycle before it breaks your business. In closing, there are 3 things that I would ask of you. First, follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. You'll get even more content that will both challenge and inspire you every week. Second, please share this podcast with at least one other person right now. And third, hit those rating stars on whatever platform you downloaded this podcast. When you do that, it raises the visibility of what we are talking about to people just like you. Holo mua, onward and upward.